My name is Listra Sam.
Jessica Heron.
Alain Philippot.
My name is Spirit River Stripewolf.
My name is Nar Hasmani.
I am an undecided voter.
I am undecided.
I am an undecided voter.
What do I care about?
The student debt crisis.
The dairy industry.
The thing that keeps me up at night is the suicides and addictions in Indigenous communities.
Not knowing if we'll have a paycheck next week.
I would sleep easier at night if I knew that I didn't have to make $1 million a year in order to become a homeowner.
I have questions.
I have questions.
I vote because I deserve to be heard.
And welcome to the National Studio here in Toronto. Tonight, we are doing something a little bit different. We promised that this election would be about you, your questions, your concerns. So we are giving most of our interview time with the federal leaders over to you, the voters. Welcome to Face with the federal leaders. I'm Rosemary Barton. Our studio tonight full of undecided voters looking for some answers. And we've invited 5 Canadians from across the country to speak one-on-one with the federal leaders. They will each get 5 minutes uninterrupted to ask whatever they like. And after their conversations, I will follow up with a few of my own questions. But really, this time belongs to them, to the voters. So we begin tonight with Liberal leader Justin Trudeau. Welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Good to see you. And to be transparent, we just gave you the first name of our lovely undecideds, their hometown general topic, but nothing more. You know me a little bit, so you'll know how that's going to go. We've asked all of our 5 lovely undecideds here to give us a quick intro that they shot themselves, so we get a sense of who they are. So we will start the clock and get to work. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Listra Sam, and I live in Vancouver, BC, on unceded Coast Salish territory. I am an entrepreneur. I have a beautiful business that I absolutely adore and am super passionate about. With the upcoming elections, one of my main concerns is home ownership. I've lived in Vancouver for 10 years now, and it's always been a little bit of an insecurity with me whether or not I even want to own a home here because of the price of housing. But now that I'm an entrepreneur, it becomes an even bigger issue because I think, who wants to give me a mortgage? So it's a big concern.
Okay, Listra, over to you.
Hello.
Hello, Listra.
I do have some concerns about becoming a homeowner in Canada. As an entrepreneur and as a single person who also doesn't have any children, I feel like I'm in a demographic that really goes under the radar. Nobody ever sees me. And the biggest concern I have is home ownership. And I've been reading some reports, and I've read a report that tells me that in order for me to become a homeowner, I would have to make $1 million. I just want to know, like, who can make $1 million in 1 year? Like, even in many years of having a business, who can make $1 million? How does this work?
Now, you live in Vancouver and you don't own your home right now. We heard this challenge from Canadians right across the country. So we introduced something called the First-Time Home Buyers Incentive, which actually gives you up to 10% off on the purchase of your first home, which is basically a no fee, no interest mortgage payment that will reduce your own monthly mortgage payments by hundreds of dollars a month. Now, we brought it in across the country, and we heard very clearly that the GTA, that Greater Vancouver, and even Victoria, the housing prices were just out of reach even on that one. Yeah. So we've actually increased it further. So homes worth up to $800,000 now qualify for that. And that's going to give a significant boost. We know it's not, going to help everyone as much as it can,
not gonna help
but
me.
It's going to make a big difference.
It's not going to help me at all. And I mean, I hear these numbers, and I can sit down and I can crunch numbers. I'm not a mathematician, but I still sit here and say, but still, how do I make that money? Like, legally, in my business, how do I make that money, you know? Like, we've got a lot of homes in Vancouver sitting there with no one in them. We have a lot of foreign investors, and I know you guys have done this, the home tax, I think empty home tax. But I don't think that's done anything. Like, there's still a lot of empty homes. And it becomes a bigger issue because it becomes something that is about community. It's about family. Like literally the only reason I stay in Vancouver is because that's where my family is. It's where my community is that I've grown over the last 10 years. I could take my business and I could move back to the Caribbean and I could take, a very small amount of money, a lot smaller than 500,000 to $1 million, and buy property and have a home, and I could give jobs to people outside. I want to contribute to the economy of Canada. I'm a Canadian citizen. I grew up here, and that feels good to me. Yeah. But this issue of what it costs, I feel like I either have to give up my dream or give up the Canadian dream, and I don't think that I should have to do that.
And I absolutely agree. You shouldn't. We want you to succeed in Canada. We want you to keep building and creating jobs and succeeding. But there is no one magic bullet that's going to save everything. So we're investing in entrepreneurs. We're looking at specific women entrepreneurs, racialized entrepreneurs, the communities that face greater barriers are going to be responded to in an initiative we have that is $50,000 of startup capital for 2,000 different entrepreneurs a year that people can qualify for.
And that's for new businesses, right?
That's for new businesses.
And it's for new entrepreneurs, none of which I fit into, but right. I hear what you're saying, but in the next 10 years, the demographic that I'm sitting in right now is going to grow exponentially, and we're going to be looking at 47% of women aged 25 to 45 that are going to be in that demographic. Yeah. You guys need to answer that.
We put a lot of different initiatives forward, and we're going to keep doing that because we need you to succeed. We want you to stay in Vancouver. We want you to be able to grow the community. We have brought in measures to fight international speculation that match what they've already done on the provincial side. We're moving forward in lots of ways to try and help you, but as you say, it's a complex situation. We know we need to do more, and that's our plan to invest in you and in communities.
Shall I give him a try?
Can you please?
Yeah, I will. So Lister's made it pretty clear here that she can't benefit, or she doesn't believe she can benefit from the homeowners incentive. I know a lot of single people without kids who don't feel that anybody is actually helping them with anything. Everyone's after middle-class families, and for obvious reasons. So maybe you could address that. What are single people without kids going to get from a Liberal government going forward?
That was a question people used to ask me all the time when we brought forward the Canada Child Benefit. Okay, I'm a low-income Canadian with no kids. Where are you helping us? That's why we created the Canada Workers Benefit that actually gives top up to low-income workers. I know that's not your space because you're an entrepreneur, but it is something that is helping significantly. There's all sorts of different programs, but there's such a diversity of Canadians that no one program is going to help everyone. That's why we keep investing in different ways to fill those gaps.
And are these federal programs?
These are federal programs.
Let me ask one more question. That Listra is a small business owner, so she has to watch what happens to her books. You made a decision yesterday that this country will stay in deficit under a Liberal mandate, with the gamble that there will be ongoing economic growth. But you know, as well as I do, that there are tensions with various trading partners. Brexit will one day get resolved. The new NAFTA has not been ratified, even though I know you have signed a deal. So how confident are you that nothing will go wrong? That, if Lister was running her small business and decided she'd be in deficit every year, there are external forces that you can't account for. What would you say to Canadians who are worried that we will find ourselves in a place where you can't get us out of?
Canada has the best balance sheet in the G7 right now. We have a AAA rating, unanimous AAA rating from the international credit rating agencies for our fiscal plan. It's only Canada and Germany that qualify for that. So we are in a very good fiscal position. And our decision is to make it easier for Listra and people like her to succeed. We're investing in supporting women entrepreneurs. We're investing in supporting home ownership. We're investing in families. We're investing in seniors. We're making a decision to say the best way to make sure Canada succeeds, including through troubled waters, is to invest in ensuring that Canadians get the training, the skills, the capital, the support they need. Yeah, that's a different choice.
Is that a gamble, though? Is that a gamble?
I don't believe it's a gamble to count on Listra and count on incredible Canadians to continue to do what they were able to do over the past 4 years, which is create over 1 million jobs, most of them full-times, have the lowest unemployment in 40 years, and lift 900,000 people out of poverty because we chose to invest in her and in people like her right across the country, contrary to the 10 years of Stephen Harper that didn't invest in
I
it.
love watching Listra's face as Mr. Trudeau answers. Okay, if Listra's turn is over, let's get to our next voter. Watch this.
My name is Jessica Heron, and I live in Cold Lake, Alberta. I currently drive a school bus while I study criminal justice in hopes of becoming a future law enforcement officer. And I have 3 amazing children, one of whom will be eligible to vote in the next federal election. I feel it's important to teach her the value of questioning our political leaders, so she deserves to have answers that are given with honesty and integrity. And that is one of the issues that I'm having with not only the current campaign and election, but the previous ones as well.
All right, it's my new friend Jessica.
Hi.
Good luck.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure to see you.
So I'm from Cold Lake, Alberta. And not only the last 4 years that you've held office, but for probably the last 5 or 6 years, we've been in turmoil. Our lives have been up in the air. For the last 5 years, my husband has been in the last 5 years, my husband has been searching for a job 5 different times. He just got laid off again last month.
I'm sorry.
So the question is, like, what do you plan to do to help Albertans? Because at a peak, our numbers were at 150,000 unemployed that had lost their jobs because of the oil crash. And people don't know where their next paycheck is going to come from. We don't know if we're going to be able to put food on the table. We don't even know if we're going to have a table to put food on, essentially. And it's scary. Everything is scary in Alberta right now, and we just don't have any answers to go off of. Yeah. So I just want to ask you what you're going to do to help us. Like, what are you going to do to help me in my situation?
Well, I mean, the first thing to recognize is Alberta has been a contributor to Canada's economy for so many decades now. You have been a tremendous benefit to Canada with your hard work, with your innovation. And over the past, as you said, 6, 7 years, it's been really tough for Alberta. What Canadians do is we're there for each other. So we made massive investments. We made changes to EI. We made changes that would help out in Alberta. But we recognize that the one thing you really need most is to be able to get our oil resources to new markets so we're not prisoners of the United States. We recognized that in the 21st century, you can't actually get new pipeline projects built unless you are taking care of the environment and creating partnership with Indigenous peoples. And we've moved forward on those 2 things to give better predictability, get better social acceptability, and to get our resources to new markets in responsible ways. The shovels are in the ground as we speak on the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. There's a lot of people across the country who don't understand why it is so important to get our oil to markets other than the United States. And we are going to be investing the profits from that in the transition towards cleaner energy and fighting climate change that I know your kids are really going to need in the coming decades.
We just want to be able to get up in the morning, put our boots on, and go to work.
Yes.
We are very work-motivated people, I feel, especially in the town that I come from. I'm used to my husband leaving at 4:30 in the morning and not coming home until after everybody has gone to bed. So we just want work, whether that's going to be oil-related jobs or if it's going to be in another completely different industry, maybe an environmentally friendly industry, which is fine. But right now, we're just sitting ducks, and we have no security and no stability. And the answers that we are getting are they're very pointed at, okay, well, Harper's government did this, or the Liberal government did this. And it's very hard to sort through the information we're getting and just get the basic answer because it's all finger pointing and political back and forth. So I just want to know how you're going to give us some stability and what we can count on, because this is my livelihood that's on the line.
Well, the first part is getting that pipeline built, because right now we're increasing the amount of oil by rail, which is both more dangerous and more polluting. Right. We need to build a safe pipeline to a well-secured marine environment, and that is the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion that we're doing, the doubling of an existing pipeline. But more than that, we need to be investing in the future of the Albertan economy, the future of our country. Big energy companies in Alberta are already making investments investments in clean technology. We know that putting a price on pollution that actually returns more money to your family than it costs. In Alberta, your average costs will be lower for the price on pollution than we actually return to you at tax time. And that's going to be a little boost for your family while we encourage that transition. But we hear the struggles that Albertans are facing, the frustration at being in a situation that you are totally not used to because you are used to working so hard and contributing to the country. And we are going to continue to be there to make sure you're building a better future, even as we transition towards cleaner technologies and a better future. Alberta will be an essential part of that.
Will we stop buying foreign oil now that we are using these cleaner technologies? Will we stop buying oil from some dirtier oil? Because we essentially, people call it dirty oil. We have some of the cleanest oil in the world. So are we going to start buying and resourcing our own oil instead of selling it to other people and then buying from other countries?
The energy mix, most of our energy comes from the United States. Most of our oil comes back and forth from the United States as well. There is some oil coming in the East Coast to the Irving oil refinery from places like Saudi Arabia. But we already use, Quebec, for example, mostly uses Western oil. So we're already doing very well on that. We're always open to doing more as well.
Okay, I think I gotta wrap it up. But I think when Jessica and I were talking earlier, she, like many Albertans, feels, and correct me if I'm wrong here, feels a little bit stuck between where we are and where we're going. And perhaps feels a little confused by a government that has bought a pipeline and wants to transition towards green technology. Where should Jessica and her husband spend their time? Should they just give up on the oil sector because you're trying to move away from it too?
No, we recognize that our world still relies very much on fossil fuels and will for the foreseeable future. But we also recognize that we do have to get to net zero by 50, and that means investing in that transition. And part of what we've promised is a just transition to make sure that as we fight climate change, as we transform our economy, we are putting your family and specifically your kids at the future of where those jobs are going to come from and where your strength is going to come from.
You see Jessica's kids working in the oil and gas sector. I mean, Jessica,
do you see your kids working?
I mean, but do you? Is it fair to say that's a dying industry because it has to be?
No, I think there will always be a need for oil and gas in certain uses over the coming decades, if not the coming century. But the mix we have towards more renewables, towards cleaner tech will also, and the efficiencies also will come in and transform those jobs so that they are actually usually more scientific, more research-oriented, more less driving trucks and operating heavy machinery, and more innovation, more lab, more higher motor skills. Your kids are going to get great educations. They're going to be able to contribute in much greater ways than generations past were.
Let's try our third questioner. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Spirit River Striped Wolf, and I'm from the Beginning First Nation. I currently attend Mount Royal University here in Calgary, Alberta. Growing up on the reserve was an amazing experience, even though there is a lot of issues in my community. Home is there, and I'm very proud to be Indigenous. I'm concerned that we aren't approaching Indigenous issues in Canada appropriately. My parents and grandparents were taught how to hate themselves in the residential schools. The residential schools disempowered the way in which we trust ourselves and others. The residential schools are a radical policy, and my concern is that we need radical policy today.
All right, Spirit, your turn.
So I'm just going to get straight into it. I think that, my people are still struggling with addictions. My people are homeless in their own lands. There are youth in my community that are going to trains and committing suicide. My people are dying. And I see Canada as kind of the cause for this, in the form of that, we were never like this traditionally. Through the residential schools, we were taught how to hate ourselves, how to, view ourselves as worthless and no good. And as a result of that, we don't trust not only you, but ourselves, our families, our communities. Canada took away our humanity and attempts to solve these with money and promises of reconciliation. And what I truly want is to know, how can we unlearn what Canada has taught us, and what can your government do to facilitate that?
Listen, thank you. Thank you. There is no way to sugarcoat it. Canada failed disastrously in the spirit and intent of the original relationships and the original treaties, which was supposed to be about shared stewardship, about partnership on this land that we were welcome, settlers were welcome to by Indigenous peoples. What we need to do is undo that, and that's what reconciliation is all about. And there's two tracks on that. One is making sure that in terms of healthcare, in terms of education, in terms of drinking water, in terms of opportunities, you are beginning to get those in ways that make sense for you and that you get to drive as Indigenous peoples, but also that we change the nature of the relationship between Canada and Indigenous peoples to be more of a nation-to-nation relationship, much more respectful.
I would probably want to just add into that, like, my nation is in southern Alberta. We have good relationships, we have resources. I went to an amazing high school. I'm going to university right now. But even when I was in university there, or even when I was in high school, there was peers of mine that would say, you can go to school, Spirit, I can't. There's this mentality, and for me, like, those things don't truly apply to my nation. And in a lot of ways, I would say I'm just as much First Nations as my chief in council. Those were systems that were implemented by Canada to assimilate us. And so I wonder what, like, you don't even have a strategy for suicide prevention. And, you know, for these kind of things, those are great, but they don't really apply too much into my situation, where these things are still there. I personally think it has a lot to do with what we learned in the residential schools and cultural genocide and what that actually means, how we teach our children, how we raise our children.
Well, you probably know better than I do that language and culture and identity are building blocks of anyone's sense of self and anyone's ability. And that's why we move forward on historic language legislation that's going to allow people to learn and preserve Indigenous languages because they're so essential.
That takes time, though, and I think of the residential schools, which were radical policy. This is taking too long. I think we need something even more radical than what's going on, because youth are literally dying a week ago in my community. Like, it happens constantly.
And it is ongoing, and we've invested more in mental health, and we've invested more in hotlines and
But it's
support
not a
lines,
mental health
but it's
issue.
not enough.
It's not a mental health issue.
It's an addictions issue, it's a poverty issue, it's a barriers issue, it's an identity issue, it's a discrimination issue, it's all these layers of things. And the one thing that I know is, as a federal government, we can't tell you what the answer is. We need to empower you to break down some of the terrible things we've done to you in the past and allow young leaders like you who are imagining those radical solutions to propose them, and we need to help create them, because what Ottawa broke, Ottawa can't fix.
Well, how do you interact with other First Nations other than our chief in council? Because, like I told you, these things that, you know, corrupted our culture and so forth, our leadership has a lot of corruption and nepotism and issues there. Where is there those opportunities for myself, who is a research assistant, who struggles with trying to find funding and opportunities for, you know, people to take what I learn and radical solutions I have seriously?
There are many communities that have moved down the path to self-government, to self-governance, and have gotten out from under the Indian Act and have created their own structures, their own leadership. I am excited to be moving beyond the Indian Act, but I can't tell you what that's going to look like. We need to be there with the funding, with the resources, so that you can create the community and the future for that community that you want. And it's a big shift, and it makes me impatient and makes you impatient because we need to do it yesterday, but we also have to do it right, and it can't be, you know, the smart people in Ottawa telling you what that looks like.
But I think you need to also put urgency into that as well.
And we absolutely have, and we will do more, because I agree we need to do much, much more.
You may not want to answer this, but what does Canada look like without an Indian Act? Is it reconstituted nations who have taken on all their responsibilities? In your head, what does that look like?
I believe it's part of a process. I mean, there are some nations where the priority has been, that have reconstituted, where their priority is on education. They want to start with making sure that their schools are the right ones, and we've given them the capacity to do that. Others want to start with governance and say, no, we're going to do our own governance. It will vary, and it has varied right across the country in the self-governing nations. And the important thing is that Ottawa be there as a partner for that. And that means things like adopting the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And there's a contrast there with the Conservatives who still think that's something that we shouldn't be doing. I mean, we need to move forward in a way that is going to respect and support Indigenous peoples in the path that you establish, recognizing that the damage we did through residential schools and other policies makes it all the much more difficult, but that's why we have to take all the much more seriously our responsibility of giving you the ability to fix it.
How do you feel about that, Spirit, that answer? I know you're doing well, but as you say, some of your friends are not. How do you feel about what Mr. Trudeau's saying?
I don't think we're looking at it in the appropriate perspective. I think that, I've heard these things before, 4 years ago, actually. And I think that we're just not looking at it in an appropriate way. I think we should be looking at education and bringing the funding up for education in Indigenous communities, which you've said that you've done, but also, curriculum for Indigenous people to, learn about worthiness and resiliency in K-12. I don't think that that's that radical, but at the same time, that's what residential schools were, right?
Yeah. Well, investing in languages, closing the gap. We have now reached parity in K-12 education in Indigenous communities versus in provincial systems. That's something we did over the past 4 years.
But a lot of dropout.
There's still a lot of dropouts. There's still real challenges because of the intergenerational trauma that goes on because of residential schools, because of all the barriers that continue to exist. But I'm the first one to say there's way more to do. But I'm also saying that I'm going to be there to do it.
Mr. Trudeau, Spirit, thank you very much. Let's move on.
Thank you. Thank you, Spirit.
Hi, my name is Alain Philippot. I live in St. Claude, Manitoba. I'm 55 years old, and I've just celebrated 25 years of marriage with my wife, Michelle. Dairy farming has its own challenges, but government policy and politics can have a huge impact on our industry. Dairy farming is my passion, and I can hardly wait to start working on our next project together with my son. And I hope that we're able to move our farm forward and to advance it to a point where we can be as proud of the next generation as we were of the past.
All right, my fellow Manitoban, off you go.
C'est un honneur, Monsieur Trudeau. Thank you for having me.
Merci, Alain.
It's an honor to meet you. Our family's been farming in Manitoba since 1912. And I'm so proud to be a dairy farmer, and I've enjoyed this career so much. But in recent trade deals, the last one done by your government, we've given up market access to foreign countries. Now, my son is the fourth generation dairy farmer, and he's wanting to reinvest in the farm, and he needs stability. What is your government going to do when the next country, after Brexit talks or whatever, come in and ask for more market access?
As you say, we've negotiated 3 really big trade deals that did involve certain concessions on access. But at the same time, particularly on the NAFTA one, it was very clear Donald Trump wanted to get rid of our supply managed system, and we were able to defend it. We also recognized that it was a bit of a hit for our dairy farmers, which is why we are working with the Dairy Farmers of Canada to make sure that we're properly compensating you for it, the way we did for CETA with Europe, the way we did for the
But on your last compensation package, only 1 in 5 of us was able to receive funds. So you've got this 7-year program for compensation, and we believe, or I believe, that the farmer, he knows how to reinvest in his farm. My son knows he has a plan, and he's putting in new technologies, but he needs to know that those funds are coming to him. He's the one who got affected. Every single farmer that got affected needs to be compensated, and the last time was 1 in 5. How are you going to, for the next 7 years, do this? Are you going to pay direct payments to the farmers, or is it going to be some other lottery program?
That's why we sat down with dairy farmers to establish the right kind of compensation. Because I heard that criticism of previous compensations. We're going to make sure that on the CPTPP one and on the NAFTA one, we get that right to give that stability, not just to you, but as you say, to your son and to that future generation of farmers. We need to have a strong agricultural sector in this country. We need strong family farms. We're going to make sure that you are confident and your son is confident in his future. As we negotiate any more trade deals, I can tell you access to supply managed sectors is not on the table for any more deals. With NAFTA and with CETA, we've taken care of that.
Okay, so you're, on international trade, I'm hearing that you're...
Yes.
We've given enough, and we're not going to give up any more.
You're not giving, even on the, you mentioned the Brexit thing, on the UK, if there is a deal with the UK, there will be no more concessions than we already have given to CETA through that. So there's no worries on that.
And this is good, but on a national level, there's also concerns. So now, the government of Canada, there's bureaucrats in the government, and they're looking at lowering the standards for a product to be labeled Product of Canada. Now, all farmers in Canada, are worried about this, the dairy sector and all the sectors. And I think that's something that affects my family, a consumer family, your family. You consume Canadian products. You might even consume dairy. I don't know.
Lots of it.
Good, thank you.
And we look for that blue cow.
Exactly. But what we're concerned about is that now you're breaking that trust that I have with the consumer. They're expecting that Product of Canada means something. And to me, it means what I put into it. And now that's going to be watered down, and it's going to have foreign content. There could be American milk in that jug of milk and still say Canadian, and that doesn't make any sense to me. What are you going to do about those regulations? Is that going to stay the same, or are you going to lower that threshold?
Up there, Alain.
Well, let me answer.
Yes, of
this
course,
is an
of
important
course.
one.
Yeah.
This was a key element. No. This is a key element that I talked about a lot when we were talking about the new NAFTA and the increased access American farmers have to our market. It is always going to be perfectly clear when something is 100% Canadian milk. There is no way we are weakening that in any way. I know you're referring to a position paper or an analysis that someone did at one point. It is not my intention to take that on. We're going to protect supply management, unlike some other parties. We're going to continue to make sure that Canadian consumers can go out there and be confident that when they're buying dairy products or any other products, they know they are supporting family farms like yours.
I know you defend supply management, and yet with every trade deal that you've negotiated, you've cracked open the door to allow more foreign cheese and dairy and poultry and whatnot. So you're saying that's over, that you will not have to compensate dairy farmers further. Is that because there's no trade deals left to have?
No,
or?
we're in the early stages of Mercosur with the east coast of South America. There are challenges around Brazil right now, so it's not necessarily moving forward. But we've already said from the get-go, no more dairy access. We're protecting our supply managed areas because, quite frankly, our farmers have given enough. And we are able to compensate them because we know that signing a NAFTA means secure jobs for Canadians. It's a good deal for everyone across the country. It allows us to give you the compensation that you need and that your son needs to be confident about the future. And once we ratify it, we will be bringing in that compensation.
What would you say to Alain about dealing with Donald Trump? And why you had to get to a place where you had to give him a little to get the rest?
Well, that was a very unconventional government we're dealing with in the White House right now. And I'd say
Alain's throwing you a lifeboat here. Don't let him go.
No, what I said was Mr. Trump was negotiating hard for his dairy farmers, and we had to push back.
And I'll say we got thrown under the bus.
By Mr. Trudeau.
Well, we're the ones that took it for the country. And so, sometimes when a road goes through the neighborhood, someone's house gets bought out. But if you go through everybody's house, everybody has to be compensated, not just 1 in 5.
Yeah. But at the same time, Donald Trump wanted to get rid of supply management altogether, and we managed to keep supply management. And yes, there was a little more.
job, Mr. Trudeau.
Oh, well, no, that's not every politician thinks we need to keep supply management.
No, but you said you
Liberals
want
were the ones
to,
who
and-
brought it in,
yeah.
and I did.
I'm holding him to account.
And we are making sure that we are going to be able to compensate Alain and his family to the full extent once the new NAFTA is ratified.
And all the farms,
Yes, yes.
not
we are
just
gonna-
1 in 5.
All right, it's time for our final voter. Here we go.
Hi everybody, my name is Nara Asmani. I'm from Toronto, Ontario. My background lies in social entrepreneurship, international business, capital markets, as well as consulting. One of my biggest concerns is how my generation is known for advocating for climate change. Although I do think this is an important issue, but I think it's shadowing other issues that we really want to bring more attention to, like the job market and how competitive for us it is to get a job now. And right now, I'm undecided because I'm not too sure which party has my generation's best interests at heart. Thank you so much.
Okay, Nara,
Okay.
off you go.
Yes, really glad to be here. So before I actually get into those issues, I like to kind of give background on myself. So I was raised in Toronto. My parents are both immigrants. My mom's from Pakistan, my dad's from India, so pretty Southeast Asian. What's great about Canada is that diversity exists. Like, we all know that. I think what makes us different is the acceptance portion of it. We are a pluralistic society. We make sure, like, you've been at the airports to, like, welcome refugees, right? You've been to different places of worship, and I know you're an accepting person. But when pictures come out with, like, brown face and stuff like that, right, it kind of creates, like, a question, like, oh, wow, is that my prime minister that's representing Canada out there? Something we really champion is pluralism. So seeing those pictures out there, first thing is, obviously I'm shocked, like, wow, okay. The second thing is, it's really upsetting to see that, something that we're really great at, and our leader is not doing that anymore, right? So my question to you is, what are some personal actions that you'll be taking to make sure that we're still able to maintain this reputation, as well as on an international perspective, right? What steps do you think Canada should be taking to make sure we're still maintaining this reputation?
We have been a government that has defended. We've been a government that has defended diversity, but the terrible choices I made many years ago have put not just a pall over that, but have directly hurt a lot of people who face discrimination every day, who thought of me as an ally, thought of me as a friend, as someone who was fighting for diversity. Yeah. And I am, and I very much am in my life today, but I didn't understand how much pain I could cause.
I totally understand that, yeah.
And I know that I am going to have to continue to fight even more than ever before for inclusion. Diversity is a fact, yes. Inclusion is a choice.
Exactly.
And how we do that, how we make sure that we are going at things like systemic discrimination and unconscious bias, and me carrying the shame of having done that personally in a blind way and hurting people who trusted and supported me and believe in Canada as this beacon, yeah, is something that I'm going to have to work extra hard at over the coming years to demonstrate
Totally
actions.
Understand that. And I think that that's great to hear, right? But what actions do you see yourself taking and Canada taking within the next couple of years?
We've doubled our funding for our anti-racism strategy, which will include systemic discrimination and unconscious bias training for government officials, for organizations. There are so many blind spots that I have, that other people have, that we need to get into, whether it's gender-based analysis, whether it's intersectionalities. We have to understand a lot more about the very real intolerance and discrimination that many people face.
That's really great to hear. Since there is not too much time, I'd like to move on to another topic that's been, I think, something that a lot of students have been thinking about. That would be the debt crisis, of course. I know you've made changes within your platform, whether that's like increasing grants or giving us more time to like pay it off. I would say one of the biggest issues why a lot of students just can't pay off debt is because we don't have jobs, right? At the end of the day, like right now, I'm putting in $40,000, one of the cheapest tuitions in the country, yet I'm still struggling to actually still pay that off. Yeah. Like last week, I went to 4 interviews myself, and I would say I have like somewhat okay experiences, and I'm having a really tough finding a job. So I get that you're making all these changes within like student loans. What are you exactly doing for me and other students to actually find a job within this competitive market, right?
We need you to get all the post-secondary education that you possibly can in order to have the most successful life you possibly can for yourself, for the family you're going to start, but also for us as a society. We need the very best from you. That's why investing in post-secondary education is a perfect example of an investment for the future. So we're increasing Canada's student grants. We went from $2,000 a year maximum in 2015. Now, if we get reelected, it'll be up to $4,200 a year, which is a significant dent for many people. On top of that, you don't have to start paying back your student loan until you're 2 years after graduating. You don't have to start paying back your student loan until you're making $35,000 a year. And if you start a family for the first 5 years of your kid's life, you don't have to pay your student loans because we want you focusing on them. Those are all things designed to make it easier for you. At the same time, making sure you're getting into that job market and can get that job worth more than $35,000 is a really big issue. That's where the fact that Canada's created over 1 million new jobs, most of them full-time, over the past 4 years is a really good thing. The investments we're making in science, in research, in training, in innovation, in AI, in new technologies, in a green economy. The trade deals we've signed around the world are creating massive opportunities for small businesses as well as big businesses. And we're investing to make sure that businesses, particularly small businesses who hire the vast majority of Canadians, are able to benefit from those trade deals. So there's not one magic bullet. There's a whole bunch of things that we need to do to make sure that you and Nara are able to build the success that we know you need to have.
Sure.
It goes by quick.
Yeah, that is.
Thank you, Nara.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to follow up a little bit, though, if that's okay with you. I'll start on the brown face, black face stuff that I know you've talked about, incidents a lot. Why do you think you had those blind spots? We're about the same age. I don't have them. I have other blind spots, but I didn't have those at 29.
I think I've always been someone who was very exuberant in my approach, and I think that remains something that people can tell of me. I genuinely thought that intent mattered. I thought that because I wasn't a racist, I could do this and it wouldn't be a bad thing. And I did not understand back then, and I'm fully upfront about it, that it actually really hurt people.
So what Nara wanted to know was, you talked about the actions your government will take, but is there something that you specifically are going to do? I myself have had a couple conversations since this came to light that changed my perspective. What are you personally doing?
Well, I'm obviously continuing to have a great and difficult sometimes conversations with community leaders, with people of different backgrounds who have shared with me some very, very real stories. One of the individuals on my youth council shared with me a story of a younger sibling who faced systemic discrimination in our medical system that meant that they didn't get the treatment that would have made a long-term difference in their life just because of bias and barriers that were totally unconscious. Learning more about this issue and reflecting on how to advance this in a meaningful way, to not just be not racist as a society, but to be anti-racist as a society, I think is something that a Prime Minister can lead on, and that I will.
I'm going to do a hard turn just to climate change, just to get a couple of your questions in. Why are you not promising to reduce emissions as quickly as the NDP and the Greens?
We are promising to get to net zero by 2050, and we're promising to go beyond our 2030 targets that we are going to meet, and we're going to surpass them. And the entire world, or the signatories to the Paris Agreement, will commit to those stronger targets next year, and you can know that we will do that. I agree with the NDP and the Greens that we need to do more. We have a tangible plan to actually do it, and the contrast, as you'll talk about tomorrow night, with the Conservative Party that doesn't think we have to act on climate change, and that's the choice Canadians are facing.
Yesterday, you expressed a little bit of frustration around climate change. You said, I think you talked about a stark choice. I wonder what you can do to depoliticize the issue, because you are using it as a wedge as much as anybody. anybody else?
Well, I think it is the defining issue of our time. I think Canadians have depoliticized it an awful lot. Conservatives decided a year ago they wanted to fight me on a price on pollution and have continued to prosecute that. And Canadians have realized, particularly driven by young Canadians, that you can't have a plan to grow the economy without a plan to protect the environment at the same time.
But do you not think
we have
you're
done a
using
lot.
it for politics too?
I think I'm using it so we make sure we get a government that is going to fight climate change and contribute to saving our planet.
I'm going to end with one last question. It's the same question I'm going to ask everybody this week. What qualities do you personally possess to make you a good prime minister? Personally.
I'm a teacher. I learn and I listen, and I believe in process. I believe in engagement. I believe every day, and this is a contrast from my dad, who came into politics with a very clear, list of things that he needed to do to make Canada a more just society. I have those values and that list and that perspective, but I know that Canadians can and must be a huge part of that conversation, and my ability to listen, to learn, and to grow, I think is what Canada needs in a prime minister right now.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you listening to all of these guys. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rosie.
Thanks to our questioners, to our audience, and of course to Liberal leader Justin Trudeau. That's day one of our special series. Tomorrow, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer will speak with different undecided voters. Later in the week, Green Party leader Elizabeth May, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh will join us. Maxime Bernier declined our invitation due to, he said, scheduling issues. I'm Rosemary Barton. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for watching.